Here's my LEGO Technic 1995 Ford F-150 Teenage Hooligan Edition. Got license plates that are supposed to read fast and loud. Got a mismatched body panel up here, maybe accident damage or just plain repairs. The whole bed has been replaced with a black one, evidently, and maybe the black bed didn't come with a tailgate, so it's been swapped with a white one from another truck. Got another license plate back here, big custom exhaust. In the bed we got a spare set of tires, they're a bit smaller, so maybe our Hooligan just upgraded tire size. We got a spare V8 engine back there, which is for this Hooligan's next project, a 1983 Ford Mustang. Opens, reveals the engine. The door is also open. Here we've got a bench seat, and then we've got 4 pedals on the floor, all of which work. A working steering wheel, a working shifter, and a working transfer case lever. You may notice something strange going on back here. Isn't that 5 infrared receivers? I thought the power function system can only support 4 on different channels. My little secret here is that one of them, the one in the middle, is actually not a power functions receiver. It's a cheap Chinese one, which has the same form factor and works the same, but happens to work on a different channel. So by using that, I was able to have 5 receivers all on different channels. A look at my massive remote here will give you an idea of what the functions are. Here we've got a 2-way shift lever. Here we've got a dial that turns on the pneumatic compressor. Here we've got steering. Here we've got a parking brake pedal. Here we've got a clutch pedal. Here we've got a normal brake pedal. Here we've got a gas pedal that takes 2 channels. And here we've got a transfer case lever. This central remote here, you can tell, is the fake one. The light on it is much less prominent, and the switches don't move as far. Also, we've got no Lego on the studs. This truck's distinguishing feature that helped me to choose to build the F-150 of this generation instead of any number of other trucks is its unique twin traction beam front suspension. This unusual design was only used in Ford light trucks in the 80s and 90s, as well as on some Mazda versions of those same trucks. And you can see my design here. So we've got a pivot right down there, that dark gray connector. So this wheel here is essentially a solid axle that pivots there. This joint here is, there shouldn't be any flex there. It's solidly attached to the differential. And then this wheel here is attached to the other beam by that black connector in the center off of the O-frame. So this axle can move independently relative to this one, and they both move independently relative to the truck. More or less, well, almost independently. So the reason this suspension is somewhat like a swing arm or Tatra design, and that the wheels just move on an axis, and thus go through some camber change, or the tilting of the tire. But this design offers presumably better handling, for the big reason that on a Tatra, the differential is part of the chassis, and then the pivots for the wheels are about, say, there and there. And the shorter the distance between the pivot and the wheel, the greater camber change it goes through. Whereas this design, on this wheel, the wheel is here and the pivot is right here. So it's a much longer distance and has much less camber change. This wheel ought to have a joint right in the center of the truck. Because of the length of Lego differentials and universal joints, I couldn't quite manage it, so instead it's right here. But it's still better than a Tatra type suspension would give you. Here's the suspension working. It's a fairly well-performing design, I think. You can see the camber change that ought to happen well, a little bit there. The rear of the truck has a much more conventional leaf spring live axle design, so it just looks like this. And if we tip up the truck, you can see that I used a Technic ball joint in there. And I'll take off the wheel, and then you can see how I used flex axles as leaf springs. Before I get too deep into the functionality of this truck, I'll just show some of the things the bed can do. So we've obviously got a folding tailgate, quite simple. Then right here, this random wrench strewn around his truck actually serves as an on-off switch. The wrench doesn't stay in very well, though, because of its tapered design. Anyways, and then the bed's last party trick is that it's actually very easy to remove. Well, yeah. There, and there. You get the bed out here, and a flat bed back here. Looks like I knocked the receivers off. I suppose if I were so inclined, I could build any number of alternate beds to put back here, but I'm not so inclined. I'm perfectly happy with the normal bed. So, as I demonstrate the functionality, I'm just going to be going from left to right on my controller, showing everything that happens. So by that, I'm going to be starting off with the shifter. So the truck has a 5+ reverse manual transmission, and it's controlled by the joystick on my remote. So by using that, I can shift through all the gears. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and missed a shift, sorry, and reverse. So you can see I'm just using this joystick here. Can't get reception there apparently. I think this is my single favorite feature on this truck. It's really cool to be able to shift it just like a real stick shift. Next is the rather boring pneumatic compressor, just controlled by this media motor here. Doesn't really do anything on its own, it just connects with the two brakes, which we'll see later. Next we have steering, which is controlled by this Power Functions large motor right here. So it runs the worm gear, which rotates this 24-tooth gear, which moves the linkage to steer the truck. And on the top, it runs some 8-tooth gears, which go to these universal joints to spin the steering wheel. So you can see the wheel move here, just a little, because I'm not steering too much right now. And then if you want to see the steering up front, it works like this. The next function on the list is the parking brake. So it's controlled by this Power Functions media motor here, which runs the worm gear, which rotates the 24-tooth gear, which then flips this old pneumatic switch, which then activates the rear pneumatic drum brakes. And also when it moves, you can see that this pedal right here will move a bit. So I'll just show that first. I'll move the switch to that side there, and then I will turn on the pneumatic compressor, and then I'll have some patience, and I'll show you when the rear brakes are working. In the end, I ran out of patience and used this manual pump here. But now, you can see the brakes are working pretty well. So it's a drum brake system, just like the real truck. You got the drum here, and then the rubber presses against it. Let's see if I can get the wheel off the drum. I'll be back in a second. So here's just the drum, and you can see through these holes we've got the axle joiner pressing there, and then it uses a long, skinny pneumatic cylinder. You can just see in the center there that pulls on both wheels. Now this one it actually bumps against the the ball joint frame here, so it doesn't actually get all that tight over here, unfortunately. But over here, it's quite impressive how tight it is. You can see right there. Just pops right out when I take the drum off. So the next function is a working clutch. So if you look at this pedal right here, you'll see it move ever so slightly. Very, very slightly, I'm afraid. But it does move. You can see that 16-tooth gear right in the center. That's part of the drivetrain that goes to the gearbox. So I'm going to be, if I run the motors, you can see that it turns. But I'm going to put down the clutch. Then you'll see it doesn't turn, and the motors are significantly louder. Or I can undo the clutch, and it'll start turning again. The clutch itself is controlled by this medium motor here, which then runs some worm gears. I move some linkages to rotate this axle, and then these bevel gears, which then goes up and moves the transmission and driving ring that actually functions as the clutch. The normal brake is controlled by this medium motor here, which then runs these gears, which run a worm gear, which run a 24-tooth gear, which flips two old pneumatic valves, one of which is under these plugs. I had to use two valves because the rear brake and the front brake had to be on completely different systems to allow for the use of the parking brake, but it works well in the end. And the front parking brake also, the front pneumatic system also hooks up to the clear blue pneumatic cylinder you can see right there, which then moves the brake pedal. So I'll put this into the braking position, and then we'll build up some pressure and I'll show you the brakes. So the rear drum brakes function as they did before when I showed you them used in the parking brake. The front disc brakes are controlled by two small pneumatic cylinders, which then extend and push that rubber part against the disc. It's not extremely powerful, but it isn't too bad. And stronger than any mechanical solution that I could have fit in here. So as you can see, the second pedal from the right, the brake pedal, is depressed right now because of all the pressure in the system. So I'm just going to undo that, and you can watch it go back up. So that's what it does. If I add a bit more pressure, I think it will move a little more. And also just move the cylinders away from the pads or from the discs and drums so it can drive better. So next up we have drive. This is done with these two buggy motors here, and so they run this V8 piston engine. You can see there. And then this power function servo motor is also hooked up to the drive motors. So when you can hear it resetting every time I stop, right? So the reason for the servo is merely to move the gas pedal, which you can see here. The final function is the 3-position transfer case. So you can see the lever right there actually moves. And you can see the transfer case right here. So right now it's in 2H, so rear wheel drive high range. So I start moving it, we can get into 4H, so 4-wheel drive high range. And then if we keep going, we should be able to get into 4-wheel drive low range. It's not quite getting there this time, but there you go, 4-wheel drive low range. So now comes the most stressful part of the video of any of my motorized vehicles, well, complicated ones, and that's the drive test. This one, I only had it working in one gear, in one mode, low range second gear, but I'll just quickly demonstrate it in all the modes. So it's in 2-wheel drive high range right now, first gear, nothing really, second, a bit of movement, third, no good, fourth, nothing, fifth, nope, and reverse, Four-wheel drive, high range, first gear. Second. Oh, shifter broke, so I'll be back in a second. Third. Fourth. Fifth. And reverse. Four-wheel drive, low range, first gear. And second gear. Maybe it's not going to drive at all this time. Then third gear. Fourth gear. Fifth. And reverse. I'm quite disappointed with how the truck drove. I was hoping that by giving it 2 buggy motors for power and then a decently efficient, fun-to-shift gearbox could overall make for a rather fun truck to drive, but I guess not. Too much complexity. Other than that, though, I was quite happy with the truck. I like the appearance, even if the front seems to be missing a little bit of something. But I liked the mismatched body panels. I liked the front suspension. The twin traction beam was quite interesting to model. And it was also my first model with drum brakes, which was interesting. And my first model with pneumatic brakes. And my first model with a parking brake. Probably its other interesting feature is just how every control in the cab actually works. But still, for me, the highlight was the gearbox with the 2 servo motors to shift it, and the actual linkages and everything. That was very satisfying. So, as I said earlier, this engine is for this kid's Ford Mustang project. So that's going to be my next project. I'll be building a 1983 Ford Mustang. Going to use the same transmission as this, be at the same scale, but hopefully be simpler and actually fun to drive. So we'll see how that turns out.